Part 1. The inspection begins. The Galactic Council's assessment fleet materialized above Earth's atmosphere on a quiet Tuesday morning. 7 ships, each shaped like elongated diamonds, their surfaces rippling with colors that human eyes struggled to process. The arrival was precisely calculated to appear both impressive and intimidating, a standard procedure the Council had perfected over millennia of first contact protocols. Earth had known they were coming. The preliminary messages had arrived 6 months ago, filled with technical jargon and bureaucratic requirements that made UN officials' heads spin. But nothing could have prepared humanity for the sheer alienness of their visitors. High Inspector Zix 427 emerged from the lead ship like a symphony of impossible geometry. Their bodies seemed to flow rather than walk, 12 tentacle-like appendages moving in perfect harmony, while sensor clusters that might have been eyes shifted and reorganized themselves across their chromatic surface. The rest of the Council delegation followed, each member more bizarre than the last, their environmental suits humming with enough computing power to run a small country. Species Assessment Protocol 7249B, Zix announced, their universal translator converting complex harmonic vibrations into crisp English. Preliminary scans indicate concerning technological disparities. Your species still relies on combustion engines? Fascinating. And potentially alarming. The human delegation, assembled at the newly constructed Galactic Welcome Center outside Geneva, maintained their composure. Most of them, anyway. Dave Chen, lead engineer of the facility's maintenance team, couldn't help but yawn. He'd been up since 4 a.m. dealing with a faulty HVAC system, and even first contact with alien life wasn't going to keep him from his third cup of coffee. The movement caught Zix's attention. All sensor clusters swiveled toward Dave as he lifted the steaming cup to his lips. Most irregular, their assistant-designated Xi 789 noted on a floating holographic display. Subject is consuming heated organic compounds in liquid form. Scanning, elevated levels of caffeine. A stimulant, in public, during a formal inspection. It's just coffee, Dave said, but his voice was drowned out by the growing commotion as the Council members began their detailed inspection of the facility. They moved through the Welcome Center like a wave of living mercury, their advanced scanning devices analyzing everything in sight. Each piece of human technology they encountered seemed to disappoint them more than the last. Physical keyboards? How quaint. Optical fiber data transmission, still bound by light speed? Is that a vending machine? You dispense nutrition through mechanical means? The Council's disdain reached new heights when they entered the maintenance section. Zix lifted a roll of duct tape from Dave's toolkit using a gravitational manipulation beam. Explain this primitive binding material, they demanded. That's duct tape, Dave replied, taking another sip of coffee. Fixes pretty much anything. The entire Council delegation vibrated in what the humans would later learn was their version of laughter. Your species attempts repairs with adhesive strips? Zix's translator struggled to convey their incredulity. Perhaps we should accelerate the assessment timeline. Clearly, your civilization requires more guidance than initially estimated. Dave exchanged looks with Sarah Martinez, his assistant engineer. They'd both spent enough years in maintenance to recognize when someone was about to learn a hard lesson about dismissing primitive tools. What no one knew, not the Council, not the human delegation, not even Dave, was that high above them, in the Council's flagship, a cascade of events was about to prove just how valuable primitive solutions could be. Subtle at first, microscopic fluctuations in the quantum field harmonics that maintained the vessel's artificial atmosphere. Most species wouldn't have noticed. The Council, with their hyper-advanced sensing capabilities, noticed everything. Anomaly detected in Sector 7, Xi 789 announced, their chromatic surface flickering with concern. The quantum core's resonance patterns are showing a 0.0001% deviation from standard parameters. Impossible, Zix 427 dismissed, their tentacles weaving complex patterns of authority. Our systems are perfect, run a level 5 diagnostic. The Council took pride in their technology. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, powered by artificial quantum singularities. and controlled by AI systems, so advanced they could predict and prevent problems before they occurred. Their vessels didn't break down. They couldn't break down. But in the maintenance bay of their flagship, reality was defying their certainty. The diagnostic results came back red, then purple, then in colors that human language had no words for. Emergency containment fields began to flicker, and the ship's primary AI fell into a recursive loop, trying to calculate the probability of its own failure. "Hi, Inspector!" A junior technician burst into the welcome center, their usually orderly tentacles twisted in panic. "The quantum core. It's experiencing cascading harmonics destabilization." Dave perked up from his fourth cup of coffee. As an engineer, he didn't understand quantum physics, but he knew what cascading failure looked like in any language. "The backup systems," Zix demanded. "Non-responsive. The quantum fluctuations are affecting all advanced technology within a 100-meter radius. Our repair drones are offline. The molecular reconstructors are failing. Even the AI can't." A deep resonant hum began to build, making the welcome center's windows vibrate. The aliens' environmental suits started flickering, their perfect technology becoming less perfect by the second. "How long until critical failure?" Zix asked, their voice modulating between frequencies of fear. 17 minutes, the technician replied. "Maybe less." The council erupted into chaos, their tentacles tangled together as they argued in harmonic frequencies that made human teeth ache. Their perfect systems, their foolproof technology, their entire technological foundation was unraveling. "We need to evacuate the sector," Shy 789 suggested. "Once the core reaches critical mass, the resulting quantum detonation will—" "Will what?" Dave interrupted, setting down his coffee cup. Years of midnight emergencies and impossible repairs had taught him to recognize when people were dancing around a brutal truth. Shy 789's sensor clusters realigned uncomfortably. The resulting detonation would create a localized rupture in space-time, approximately 3 kilometers in diameter. "That's most of Geneva," Sarah whispered. "We have protocols for this," Zix insisted, but their chromatic surface had paled to an almost translucent state. "We just need to... The humming grew louder. Somewhere above them, in the perfectly engineered heart of an impossible ship, physics itself was coming undone. Dave stood up, brushing coffee grounds off his maintenance uniform. He looked at Sarah, who was already reaching for their toolkit. "You know," he said, "we might have some ideas about this." The entire council turned to stare at him, their sensor clusters focusing with desperate intensity. "You!" Zix's translator crackled with disbelief. "What could you possibly—" Another alarm joined the symphony of failure, this one deeper and more urgent than the others. 15 minutes to critical mass, the ship's AI announced, its perfect voice showing hints of strain. Dave picked up his toolkit, making sure he had plenty of duct tape. "Time to show you what primitive technology can do." Dave and Sarah jogged behind their alien guides, their boots echoing on surfaces that rippled like liquid metal. The ship's walls pulsed with failing quantum fields, casting prismatic shadows that made their eyes water. "The core chamber is ahead," G789 announced, their voice modulating with increasing distress. "But I must warn you, our technology operates on principles your species hasn't even discovered yet." Dave wiped sweat from his forehead. The temperature was rising as the containment fields weakened. "Sometimes that's an advantage. Hard to overthink when you don't know what's impossible." The core chamber doors parted like curtains of light. Inside, chaos reigned. The quantum reactor, a sphere of pure energy suspended in a lattice of impossible angles, was turning colors that shouldn't exist. Alien technicians floated on anti-gravity platforms, their advanced tools sparking uselessly against failing systems. 12 minutes to critical mass, the ship's AI announced. Sarah whistled low. "That's your quantum core? Looks like a plasma containment problem to me." "Impossible," one alien technician objected. "The plasma is merely a byproduct of the quantum reactions. The real issue is the harmonic destabilization of the—" "Look," Dave interrupted, pulling out a tablet. "See these heat patterns? Classic containment breach. Doesn't matter if it's a nuclear reactor or a quantum core. When you lose containment, things get hot where they shouldn't." He turned to Sarah. Remember that time the particle accelerator at CERN started leaking coolant? The midnight shift from hell? How could I forget? Sarah was already digging through their toolkit. We're going to need a lot of tape. You cannot possibly suggest, Zix began, but Dave was already moving. First, we redirect these plasma vents. They're fighting each other, making the instability worse. He tore off a long strip of duct tape. The aluminum backing can handle the heat long enough to... That's impossible. Z789 sensor clusters spun in distress. The plasma temperature is over 10,000 degrees. Sure, but we don't need it to last forever, just long enough to stabilize the flow. Dave slapped the tape across two leaking conduits, creating a makeshift channel. The alien technician's horror was almost audible. Sarah, meanwhile, was studying the quantum lattice's support structure. The primary problem is these power surges. They're overwhelming your containment fields, but if we create a bypass... She pulled out more tape along with some copper wire from their kit. Basic electrical principles still apply, even to quantum systems. We just need to give the excess energy somewhere to go. 9 minutes to critical mass, the AI helpfully noted. What followed was perhaps the most unorthodox repair in galactic history. Human ingenuity met quantum physics in a dance of duct tape and prayer. Dave and Sarah worked with the speed of people used to fixing impossible problems on impossible deadlines, while the alien observers recorded everything with a mix of horror and fascination. Think this is going to make it into their engineering manuals? Sarah grinned, sealing another jury-rigged bypass. The electrical work is a nightmare, Dave said between sips of his now cold coffee. But what worries me is that secondary containment ring. The quantum feedback is going to tear it apart unless... He paused, staring at the quantum core with the look that Sarah recognized, the one that either preceded a brilliant solution or a spectacular disaster. Hand me that roll of tape, all of it. I have an idea. The chamber hummed with unstable energy, making every hair on his body stand on end. What he was about to attempt would either save Geneva or go down as one of the most spectacular failures in human history. The quantum feedback is creating a resonance loop, he explained, tearing off long strips of tape with practiced precision. Your containment fields are fighting against each other instead of working together. That's basic quantum theory, an alien technician scoffed, but without proper field harmonizers. Sometimes, Dave interrupted, you don't need fancy harmonizers, you just need to break the loop. He began applying the tape in a precise pattern around the secondary containment ring, creating what looked like a silver spiderweb. Sarah caught on first. The aluminum backing, you're creating a makeshift Faraday cage. Sort of, more like a quantum feedback dampener. The metallic structure should disrupt the resonance just enough to... A massive surge of energy pulsed through the core, making the entire chamber shudder. Several alien technicians lost their footing on their anti-gravity platforms. 4 minutes to critical mass. Sarah was already moving, reinforcing Dave's tape pattern with copper wire salvaged from their toolkit. The aliens watched in stunned silence as two humans essentially rebuilt their quantum containment system with materials from a maintenance cart. The primary coolant loop is stabilizing, G789 reported, their voice carrying a note of disbelief. But the core temperature is still rising. Dave drained the last of his cold coffee and tossed the empty cup aside. Time for the crazy part. He pulled out a small package from his pocket, emergency thermal paste, normally used for overheating computer servers. You cannot be serious, Zix's translator struggled to convey their horror. That is a quantum singularity. You can't just... Watch me. With movements that spoke of years fixing equipment that should have been replaced decades ago, Dave began applying the thermal paste along key points of the containment ring, right where his tape pattern intersected. 2 minutes to critical mass. The core pulsed again, but this time something was different. The wild energy fluctuations began to smooth out. The impossible colors started shifting back toward a more stable spectrum. The quantum resonance is stabilizing. G789 sensor clusters spun in confusion. But how? Sometimes, Sarah explained, monitoring the readings on her tablet. The most complex problems have simple solutions. Your quantum fields were overcorrecting, creating feedback loops. The tape pattern breaks those loops, and the thermal paste helps manage the energy dispersion. 1 minute to critical mass, error, quantum cascade reducing, core stabilization at 47% and rising. The humming that had filled the ship began to fade. Emergency lights flickered and returned to normal. Across the chamber, advanced alien technology slowly came back online. Dave sat down heavily on a nearby maintenance drone, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "Got any more of that coffee?" he asked Sarah. "Core stabilization at 89%, 92%, 98%, the AI announced. Quantum containment restored. All systems returning to normal parameters." The alien technicians floated down from their platforms, their sensor clusters fixed on the decidedly unadvanced solution that had just saved their most advanced technology. "This is," Zix began, then paused as their translator seemed to search for appropriate words. "This is not possible. It cannot be possible. And yet—" They gestured at the quantum core, now humming peacefully in its containment field, surrounded by a web of duct tape and thermal paste that had no right to work as well as it did. "Perhaps," G789 suggested carefully, "we should revise our assessment criteria." Sarah helped Dave to his feet. "Got any more impossible repairs need doing? Or can we break for lunch?" The quantum core pulsed serenely, held together by human ingenuity and hardware store supplies. Above it, the ship's AI began updating its engineering protocols, adding new entries about adhesive strips and thermal conductive compounds. Part 5, A New Perspective. 3 days after the quantum core incident, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session in the Geneva Welcome Center. The meeting room buzzed with an energy that had nothing to do with quantum physics. Hundreds of sensor clusters focused on Dave and Sarah, who sat uncomfortably at the center of attention. The official report, Zix 427 announced, their chromatic surface shifting through formal patterns, has presented us with a unique challenge. How do we classify a civilization that fixes quantum singularities with adhesive strips? The Council's assessment team had spent 72 hours analyzing the repair footage. They'd run simulations, conducted studies, and still couldn't quite explain why it worked. Our initial classification parameters were insufficient, G789 admitted. The human approach to problem solving defies our traditional metrics. Dave sipped his coffee, now provided by the Council in what appeared to be a quantum-stabilized cup. Sometimes the best solution is the simple one. Simple? A Council scientist's tentacles twisted in emphasis. You created a quantum feedback dampener out of metallic adhesive strips. You managed plasma flow with thermal paste. These solutions should not work. And yet, the scientist gestured at a holographic display showing the repaired core. The duct tape pattern had been reinforced with more permanent materials, but the original design remained. The Council's engineers had discovered that any attempt to improve the repair actually made it less stable. We've had to revise our entire approach to emergency protocols, Zix continued. Every ship in the Council fleet is being equipped with what we're calling human emergency response kits. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You mean, yes, duct tape, coffee, and various other primitive tools we previously dismissed. Our artificial intelligences are being updated to consider unconventional solutions. Furthermore, G789 added, we're establishing an exchange program. Council engineers will train with human maintenance teams. There are clearly aspects of practical problem solving that our advanced education has caused us to overlook. Dave tried not to smile as a group of alien technicians reverently studied a roll of duct tape, their sensor clusters analyzing it from every angle. There is one more matter, Zix announced, the Council's formal assessment of Earth's technological status. The room grew quiet. This was the moment that would determine humanity's place in the galactic community. We hereby classify Earth as— Zix's surface rippled with what might have been amusement, innovatively advanced. Confused murmurs filled the room. This was not a standard classification. You created a new category for us? Sarah asked. You created it yourselves, G789 explained. When faced with technology you didn't understand, using tools we considered obsolete, You found solutions we never imagined. That is its own form of advancement. The Council has existed for 10,000 years, Zix added. In all that time, we focused on perfecting our technology. Perhaps we forgot that tools are only as useful as the minds that wield them. Later that evening, as the Council fleet prepared to depart, Dave and Sarah watched from the maintenance bay. The ships gleamed in the sunset, their quantum cores humming in perfect harmony, each one now carrying a small supply of duct tape, just in case. Think they'll ever need it? Sarah asked. Dave smiled, raising his coffee cup in a final salute to the departing ships. Probably. Some problems are universal. And sometimes the best solution is the one simple enough to work. Above them, the Council ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving Earth with an upgraded status in the galactic community, and taking with them a newfound respect for human ingenuity. And somewhere, in the vast archives of the Galactic Council, a new proverb was added to their engineering manuals. When advanced technology fails, trust in human creativity, and always keep duct tape handy. Have you ever solved a complex problem with a simple solution? Maybe we all have a bit of that human ingenuity inside us. Remember to always keep your duct tape close and your coffee closer. You never know when you might need to save a quantum core.